Welcome to another episode of the BAMF Health podcast. Today, we are focusing on clinical trials. Clinical trials, a huge part of what BAMF Health does and what we're about. And so joining us today, our special guest, is BAMF Health's VP of Clinical Trials, Dan Rogers. Dan, thanks for joining us.
So nice to be here. Thanks very much for having me.
Appreciate you coming and talking about what is sort of a core of BAMF Health and what we do and what we're focused on. But let's back up a second. Clinical trials research is a super unique field, really interesting thing to get into. So I want to know, is this something you always wanted to do, something you sort of fell into? How does one get into clinical trials and research?
I think you'd find if you talk to anyone in this field that people don't grow up with an image in their mind of, man, if I could only be in the clinical research field, I will have made it.
Yeah.
My parents were in the medical field, and going into college, I was trying to buck that. And I was looking at teaching and other opportunities and kind of exploring like some people do early in their college careers. And my first job ended up being work in the ER with my dad, who was a physician there. And really what I learned from that is being there with people kind of on their worst days of their lives and being able to support them and help them through that. That was really meaningful, and it really shapes my career starting out from that. And so I was exposed to some research opportunities early on and helping out some of the ER physicians in that, and understanding, what it takes to move medicine forward and not being satisfied with the status quo of how things are working today. And I was really excited about that. And I took my first job out of college in clinical research.
And you stuck with it.
And I stuck with it. It's been evolving over time in the ways that I help out in the field, and the ways that I partner with physicians and scientists at Van Handel Institute, at BAMF now, and it's really been a joy my entire career.
That's great.
That's awesome. And I think just for those listeners that may not be familiar with clinical trials, or maybe they've heard the phrase, but not exactly kind of dived into it when it's all said and done. What's your clinical trials 101? Kind of what are they? What is the purpose they serve? How would you explain that to people with a variety of different backgrounds?
Sure. So really every medicine, every imaging procedure, every, technique that's used in medicine, it has all come from doing research to understand, would this work and help patients out better than what we're doing today? Clinical trials are a way to do that very rigorously in a way that is controlled, is safe, and then looks to understand, is this better than what we have with other opportunities? So that's probably the easiest way that I describe Clinical Trials 101. Today, particularly in oncology, where we do a lot of trials, this starts early on in a phase 1 trial where we're giving that drug to humans for the first time, or that new treatment technique, that new imaging. And really a lot of work has happened in the laboratory and bolstering, is this going to be safe for humans? Mm-hmm. And once it passes muster there and it is approved by the FDA, then we do the first phase 1 trial there. Sure. That's done in a limited number of patients. They're really looking to just see, is this safe? And what dose should we be looking at for an expanded population in phase 2? And then trying to understand in the next phase, is this working in those patients? Is it efficacious, is what they say? And then that's going to move on to a phase 3 trial where they're going to compare that against the existing standard of care or existing treatment that they're using today. Mm-hmm. If all that works, if it proves out better than that, that's what leads to a submission in the U.S. to the FDA to seek approval from the FDA to be able to sell that drug commercially and make that available widely to patients across the U.S.
Yeah. No, and we're lucky in Grand Rapids, not only our institution, but others just have all the different phases of trials and all the different opportunities for cancer and beyond. So it's always awesome. And to your point, right, every single thing that we ever take or might have heard of in the medical field has gone through this process. And I think sometimes people are concerned about a clinical trial for various reasons, which we'll get into in a little bit as well. But it's really something that a lot view as an opportunity or a unique offering to advance the science, to help themselves, and to continue to kind of advance the medical field as a whole. So it's really great.
Yeah, totally agree. We're very fortunate in Grand Rapids, with the medical mile, with the hospital systems that we have in the area, with the independent oncology practices and other groups here. There's really a focus on having these innovative options available for our patients. Right. And not just a last line of when everything else has failed. More and more of these are being seen as, upfront and earlier opportunities to catch that disease when that treatment might be more effective for them.
Right. Absolutely.
And here in Grand Rapids at BAMF, we really are on par with institutions across the country who are doing the most advanced clinical trials. We have access to some of the most advanced and the newest and the most novel. So how do we get access like that? And how unique is it to have access like that?
Well, I think our portfolio of the trials that we have here and largely in the oncology space for patients is really a unique thing. This stems from the vision of Anthony Chang, our CEO, and the mission that he set out from the beginning is that we're here to increase access and increase affordability of this precision medicine for patients. He saw the promise in this technology and wanted to help further the field. He saw a gap that a lot of academic medical centers and hospital systems didn't have the infrastructure, both physically and the people, to be able to carry out trials like this and efficiently do the clinical development. When you're developing a new drug, you're racing the clock on its patent life. And that's what's driving the investment from a pharma company to actually develop that drug further and for that to be available to a lot of people. And I think what we've done very well at BAMF Health is helped to be, one, the infrastructure for this, of the novel technology like a total body PET CT that we have and the SPECT CT that we have for looking at images after the treatment's given, as well as we have the team and people to be able to conduct these trials who are really experienced in doing complex radiopharmaceutical clinical trials. And so that's the niche that we've built and where we've developed a lot of expertise so that a lot of the industry looks to us to be the first site to open up these trials, to give those first drugs to those patients. We have the space that's safe and set up. We have expert physicians who know if patients would qualify and do well participating in that trial. And so really we have brought a lot of these pieces together here in Grand Rapids. Very unique in a small town to be able to do that as an independent center. We're up there against a lot of the top centers in the U.S. that you would know well, academic medical centers or large hospital systems that have really robust clinical trial programs.
That's great. And it's not only here, it isn't about just what's happening in West Michigan and what's happening in Grand Rapids, but you and your team are building a network of sites across the country. It's called RadioNexus, is that platform or program. So tell us about that and the drive to get these trials not only here in Grand Rapids, but then enable sites across the country.
Yeah, at BAMF, it's never been about just Grand Rapids. It's been about how do we increase access, availability, affordability, everywhere. And we knew that Grand Rapids was just the starting point. We knew that if we could prove this out in Grand Rapids, that we'd be able to move this much more broadly. I think what's really exciting is the success that we've had in Grand Rapids has led to some really tremendous partnerships with Henry Ford, with University of Kansas and Children's Mercy Hospital, and a number of health systems that we're going to be excited about announcing in the near term. I think what's resonating with them is we've developed the program for this, particularly in clinical trials, to support doing these trials efficiently and safely and just a strong, robust program for that, where they've had challenges doing that themselves. And we're there to work together to further develop a program in their hometowns and make this available there as well. I think what really becomes powerful is when we have a network of clinical trial sites that are able to do the same trial or, groups of trials. We can really move the field forward that much faster, make these treatments and diagnostics available that much sooner, advancing precision medicine. I'm really excited about the development of our network.
Yeah.
And I think this is super unique because Theranostics are radiopharmaceutical treatments, right? The infrastructure, as Anthony and then you have elucidated, is kind of the principal rate-limiting step when it's all said and done. Maybe the inexperience in that space, the concerns over handling radioactive material, how do you incorporate this, who's going to be the leader in that space in a given academic or community practice. In trying to put all these pieces together, it's a little bit less straightforward with radiation medicines when compared to other treatments, right? It's imaging, it's urine and blood monitoring, it's lots of hours, lots of radiation safety and handling on the front and back end. So I think it just speaks volumes to what you've set up, what BAMF has set up, to the ability to do what we've done in Grand Rapids as kind of that showcase or that flagship and that exemplary opportunity that we can share with others. It just adds so much value when it's all said and done. And I think because of everything that's happening in Grand Rapids, it will then accelerate things throughout the country, which is super exciting. So
I think beyond just the partnerships in our network that we're building, I know that we're having an impact on the field, and we're seeing, people looking to us, talking with us about, how do we build a facility like yours? How do we build a team like that? Or modeling after what we've done. And that's the biggest form of flattery. And more importantly, that's having a big impact on the patients that they're serving as well. So I love to see that across the field.
Yeah, and it's also neat just kind of because we've been involved for so many years now, where it feels like we're getting involved earlier on, even in clinical trial design, or at least the opportunity to give feedback when it's early on and there's not many sites, or we may be the first site included. And so that's also great because we've seen how things have worked here in the United States, and we know what some of the do's and don'ts are, some of the things that might preclude the ability to get people enrolled or help more patients more quickly. And I think from my perspective, it's been really neat to have more of the openness or more of the trust or more of the voice within that space to make sure that patients are getting what they need and that institutions can actually carry these things out as well. So,
yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think the gap between sponsors, these pharma companies and a site like ours can be a really wide gap. Often there's a company in the middle called a contract research organization who's really skilled at running clinical trials. Unfortunately, across the field, there's just not a lot of depth in the radiopharmaceutical niche that we focus on. And because we have so much experience on trials here, we've done about 40 trials at our center since opening in October of 2022, which is, again, I put that up there with any other center across the U.S. I think our depth of experience there has really led to that ability to shape the design of trials and for the betterment of not only the data that comes out of that and understanding did it work or not, but also the patients that it's serving as part of the trials.
Yeah.
Because of that expertise, then we're getting opportunities to dose the first patient in the U.S., dose the first patient in the world. And maybe for the general public, they don't understand the significance of that. So talk to me about what is the significance of being the first in the world to sort of initiate and launch a particular trial?
Well, I think it's a big honor to have that and hold that responsibility and be the experts like Dr. Mancini and Dr. Kulkarni at BAMF to be the lead investigators that are on the front edge of that. You're really trusted with, hey, you've done this before, and we know that you can not only manage this project well, but also take care of the patients well on the trial. And then I think, again, us trying to move the ball forward faster for developing these what we think these drugs that have a lot of promise for helping more patients. We want to be pushing that as fast as possible, as safely as possible. And by being that leading site, by starting up the trial sooner, by getting that first patient dose sooner, we're just one step closer and faster than we were as an industry before.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that patient population. I think in some cases, patients are coming to us because this is sort of a last option. Maybe they've run out of standard care options. In other cases, people are saying, I understand the value of clinical trials, I understand the science, and I want to be part of it, and I just want to help advance the science. Then you've got healthy individuals in some cases who want to sort of volunteer as well from the opposite perspective. So tell us about the variety of patients that can participate in trials like these.
Yeah, I think all that you mentioned are really important to us, again, moving our understanding of these new drugs or new imaging forward, this new care forward. From our clinic, I know that we really take the approach of trying to make patients aware of all the opportunities up front that are available to them. And I would love to see that for every patient, particularly in the oncology space. And that's really difficult to do, to convey all the opportunities. And, these are complex trials that have a lot of different upsides and, potential risks that come along with that. And you need to consider that carefully. And having a physician that can talk through that with you is really meaningful. And I'm really proud of the way that Dr. Mancini practices within our clinic. And I know that same approach is used quite a bit here from other providers in the independent oncology groups or the hospital systems close by too. But also keeping Dr. Mancini apprised of all the opportunities is really difficult too. We could probably talk more about that. But in terms of patients that come in, yeah, I think some are independently reaching out to us, finding us through our website or clinicaltrials.gov or other ways. Maybe their physician knows that BAMF might have opportunities here and they're referring them for a consult and consideration for some of the trials. And I do think some patients are more aggressive and trying to understand their opportunities sooner and do that themselves. We've also seen an uptick of patient-facing services that might be, web, like what would be the right word for this?
Search engines,
guide tools, or even times they include nurse navigators or PhDs involved that can understand the science and help to translate that for someone who didn't study that but has the disease or their family member does, and they want to consider what trial options are out there. So having someone that can help you navigate that and understand the opportunities I think that's something that's really valuable for the community at large. The healthy patients, I think, is really interesting. We often see that from caregivers or loved ones of someone going through that. Hey, is there anything that I can be doing further to participate in this? So I think that probably covers the waterfront on how people find out about trials or given the opportunity to consider participating.
Yeah, and even like in the national guidelines, which kind of is that blueprint for making sure patients are getting the highest level of care, there are several situations that if patients have had disease that spread outside of the area it originated from, so for example, prostate cancer, if it was found in the bone or elsewhere, a lot of times it'll list clinical trials like the first recommendation or at least one of the options that should be offered at every different decision point that the patient and their provider would have to make. And I think it just speaks on behalf of the volume and the promise within clinical trials that is happening, but also the science is just advancing very, very rapidly. And so just always keeping it at top of mind that these things should be considered and have a lot of potential is super important. And even in my daily interactions, I mean, when patients, we go through all the options, we ensure any clinical trial they may fit for and or standard of care therapy with the risks and benefits of either approach. But there is a ton of interest in that space because some patients even find that if it's a clinical trial that might be a good fit, that they see it as a way of maybe even saving standard of care options for later if they're on a trial that is effective in improving their situation. And so sometimes the next great thing is in that trial, and people have to take an informed and calculated opportunity to consider things like that, which may end up really helping themselves and others for years to come. So,
and that's an important conversation. Maybe that conversation isn't happening everywhere, but that's something, like you said, you see every day. You get to talk to a patient and say, yeah, maybe you could come here and get our standard care treatment right now, but let me offer something different. I mean, you have to know your stuff, you have to know the patient, and you have to know how to have that conversation.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the art of the process, and some people are there and some people aren't, and we meet people where they are, and it's more of just knowing. To Dan's point, there's a ton of proactivity happening as well, meaning patients may know that clinical trials are in their future as far as options that may or may not exist, and they're trying to gather as much information as they can, knowing what exists or what the prospects would be, not only at our institution, but across the country and world. And so there's a lot more proactivity in that space, finding what the options are, when it fits, what needs to be done to be considered, and so forth. And as information, as AI and things continue to evolve, we're in this information seeking and information available era where people want this and are getting set up for success and living their best lives even with their cancer. So
kind of brings us to the discussion of how do you find clinical trials? And I think the quick answer probably is it's often tough, especially if you're a person with no medical background, you've never had a family member go through something like this before, you've never thought about it. It is tough. Like you said, there are more sites popping up that are offering resources and maybe a more person-friendly searchability structure, but it's still hard.
Yeah, just as I was saying, it's a real challenge to put all the pieces together. I think even if you find a trial at the site, whether you're looking at clinicaltrials.gov or one of these other search engines that you come across, or maybe the website of the practice or health system that your care is being done at, just because you find that listed there, it doesn't mean that one, you're the right fit for that trial, or two, that it's open for you to be able to participate in that. Particularly in early phase trials, it's gated so that they treat a couple patients, then they look to see safety wise, how did that work for those patients? Do we need to make any adjustments? Do we continue forward? And so that, available limited slots, your timing really becomes an important thing. So having a good advocate in your provider and helping to understand what the opportunity is and what the timing constraints are with that, I think are really important with that. In our niche of radiopharmaceuticals, in addition to the slots, we have challenges on the logistics front of when those trials are available too. Like maybe doses of that drug are not available because it's made across the world and it's limited on how many doses they can make. And so it's just this extra layer of logistical challenges with our type of trials.
And we're not only doing pharma trials, which that's the majority of what we're doing, pharmaceutical company sponsored trials, and we're a site for those, but we do our own. We look for opportunities for us to lead the research and come up with the trial for something in particular. So tell us about our investigator-initiated trials that BAMF does.
Yeah, I think maybe just as a high-level concept, what we tried to set up from an infrastructure was the ability that whoever has a question about would this treatment work or would this new way of taking care of patients be better, we want them to be able to come to us and for us to be able to take that the rest of the way for them. And so whether that's a pharma company that has a new agent or a new device, or if that's our own physician scientists or some of our partners that come along, we want to be able to execute that study and help the patients and get the data from that to understand did that work or not, in as efficient, safe, and high quality a process as possible. And so out of our own science, I think it wouldn't surprise you that we're trying to, again, advance precision medicine and understand how this technology might work better for patients. Things like how do we use a lower dose of CT and understand if that's as good as existing CT technology, or can we use a lower dose of the PET tracer that we use? How can we utilize this technology the best that we can for understanding the disease or, furthering the care of those patients, expanding into new disease populations where we see that, hey, this imaging works in cancer. We have a suspicion that it might work in another field. And so applying it there and studying that in those patients, I think, is the type of work that we do at BAMF.
Yeah, and I think that allows for unique questions to be asked or proof of principle, proof of concept type ideas, where maybe if you can enroll 10 to 30 patients, for example, of a certain imaging technique, that may then open the conversation. If there's any signal that something is working or you're detecting something or something seems safe or better than standard, that might be enough to then allow for the propagation of a much larger trial that could involve many sites across the country or world. So a lot of times the ability to be nimble, to ask unique questions. They even have something called N of 1 trials, where if you have something super unique that really applies to a patient and you need to move quickly and try to address something for them, that you can have a protocol that addresses a unique image or therapy in that person as well. So there's a lot of different ways, but I think just the speed, the unique questions, it just allows a little bit more flexibility at the institutional level. But then again, because of those relationships, because of that experience, then ultimately may spark a lot more ideas or bigger, broader trials in the future. So
I think part of the reason we're very excited about the partnership in Kansas City, especially involving Children's Mercy, is that potential to also investigate this field of medicine for children. It's something that hasn't been done a lot. And that's got to be exciting for you and your team to think about not only what we can do from the adult perspective, but the potential that exists, the possibility that exists for this in children.
No doubt. I mean, pediatrics have long been maybe shied away from in the development of new treatments, new imaging, all that, because of some inherent risk or perceived risk of doing research involving children. It's at the end of the day, it's much more complex work to figure out how to do this safely and move forward in that way. And so having a great partner like CMH or, in Grand Rapids, Helen DeVos Children's Hospital and partnerships there, it's really meaningful to stand side by side and work towards, advancing this field in that space. Obviously, oncology is the area that we'll dive into initially, but I think there's a lot of opportunity outside of that using radiopharmaceuticals or precision medicine for imaging and therapy in the pediatric populations.
Yeah. It's exciting. Okay. We have time for some rapid fire questions, or maybe not so rapid fire. We'll give you a couple minutes to answer. But when it comes to clinical trials in general, people have fears. They have misconceptions. There are myths about what they are and what they aren't. So let's address some of those. The first one is sort of this idea that you're a test subject, you're a guinea pig, you're just being tested upon. And that's not how it works.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. Before any medicine, any new treatment goes into humans, it has to be approved by ethics committees, or what's called an IRB, as well as the FDA if it involves a new medicine or device. And the rigor in that is quite extensive. And so making sure that the type of trial that's going to be done involving a human, it's been so vetted out by the time it gets to patients. So in terms of you're just going to be injected with a new drug and we'll see if that works or not, is completely a farce. It's a very well-controlled thing, and they're studying to understand, is this safe first and foremost, and then second, does this work or not?
Yeah, it's almost like even more strict sometimes than standard of cares, right? You're monitored closely. There's a lot more checkpoints, et cetera. So if anything, it's even closer and more personal and more contact with the healthcare team. Yeah,
it can be a real upside for patients.
Of
if you want, more personalized care, actually participating in a trial is actually going to give you a lot of that, healthcare facing time.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
The other thing is that, and there's some nuance in this, but the fear that I'm going to get a placebo and I'm not going to get the actual treatment. Unfounded in some cases. In some cases,
yeah. I mean, when you're in that later phase 3 of trials, where we've already in phase 1 understood that it's safe, and phase 2, it's safe, and we're seeing that, okay, this could work well. Phase 3, they're really looking at, is this better than what we have existing or not? For cancer patients, it would not be okay to give a cancer patient a placebo, where we know that that disease is there and it needs treatment. And so you're getting randomized in some cases to either the study drug, what we're trying to test what's new, or what the existing standard of care is. That's very common in the oncology space. Now, outside of oncology and maybe cardiology, maybe diabetes, other settings, it might be different. And it's about what first and foremost is safe and ethical for that patient. And it has to be, if they need treatment, it has to be the standard of care. Maybe you don't need treatment though, and maybe that's where a placebo might make sense in that type of trial. But that's the way that people designing trials have to think about and have to meet the rigor of.
Mm-hmm. All right. Other people might feel like, okay, I go down the path of enrolling in a clinical trial, and once you're in, you can't stop. You're stuck. That is also not true.
Correct. Yeah. Consent for participating in human subjects research is ongoing, and you have to give that, and you can withdraw at any time, any point in that. There are some rules if you're receiving a new therapy. Sometimes that has to be considered and worked out with your physician. How do you come off of that therapy safely? But you can withdraw your consent at any point in time.
And then finally, the time commitment. People might be concerned, I'm going to have to be in the clinic every single day, and I'm going to be there for 8 hours a day. And it, in some cases, is multiple visits, but it could also be one single visit. So it's not necessarily weeks on end of coming into a clinic.
Yeah, I mean, each trial has its own nuances of, what the commitment looks like for participating in that. What I'd say our team does really well is looking for opportunities for this to fit into your life. Often in the oncology space, I think, your cancer can become your life. And it's really important for us that we find a way that treatment works and that participation in that trial works for you, for you to be able to return to as much of your life as possible.
And I would say on average, just for the radiopharmaceutical trials that we have, after the first treatment, there might be a little bit more visits for 3-4 days, but just on average over a period of months, it's about once every other week that something might have to be done, just as a complete broad statement. So to Dan's point, there's more than normal, but definitely a balance between coming to the clinic and not, and knowing that they're set up to try to optimize the science and the information gathering, but the well-being of the person as far as time commitment is always thought of as well.
Well, and there's a difference between the commitment in a therapy trial and the commitment in an imaging trial, maybe. What's the distinction there?
Imaging trials where we're trying to understand, does this targeted PET tracer go to where we think it's going to go? Does it image the disease and not the rest of your body well? Those can be really short. It could be as short as one visit. Just literally come in, have your imaging done, and go on your way. Sometimes it's multiple time points, multiple scans that are being done as part of that. It can just vary trial to trial. Yeah. Therapy trial, different, right? Yeah. Typically, you're going to have multiple cycles of a trial, roughly a month or 6 weeks apart. And with the first one, as Brandon mentioned, you're going to have more safety follow-up close to that first treatment. And then the subsequent cycles are going to be more about, get the therapy and we'll follow up, in a week's time or 2 weeks' time. Yeah.
Regardless of what the trial is, incredible opportunity to advance science, bring more options to people, to patients, and give hope to people in the future that will catch disease quicker and be able to treat it more effectively. So thank you for what you and your team are doing. We appreciate it.
Oh, thanks very much for having me here today.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining. Thanks. All right. We'll see you next time.